Chase Blackwood had humiliated 47 students in his 4 years at Riverside Prep. But on November 3rd, at exactly 3:17 p.m., his reign of terror ended in 12 seconds. Harper Sinclair's flying knee didn't just crack his chin, it shattered everything Riverside Prep thought they knew about power, privilege, and what happens when the wrong person finally stops staying silent. You're about to witness how one orphan girl with a scholarship and a secret turned a moment of ultimate humiliation into the most viral school justice story of the decade. By the end of this, you'll understand why sometimes the most powerful weapon against a broken system isn't a policy or a protest. It's one person who refuses to break. Stay until the very end, because what happens after this video surfaces will change not just one school, but spark a movement that reaches the highest levels of American education. Harper Sinclair looked like everything Riverside Prep's elite families feared: poor, parentless, and persistent. At 17, she carried herself with the careful invisibility that scholarship kids perfected, always 3 steps behind the pack, never quite making eye contact. Her second-hand uniform tailored to fit, but never quite hiding its origins. What they couldn't see beneath those careful layers was 8 years of Muay Thai training at downtown gyms where your background didn't matter, only your ability to survive the next round. Harper's story started in the state system at age 9, bouncing between foster homes until she aged out at 16. Fighting wasn't a hobby, it was survival training, and the discipline that kept her alive on the streets had earned her a full academic scholarship to the most exclusive prep school in the state. She'd promised herself 3 things, graduate valedictorian: get into Stanford, and never let anyone see her real capabilities. 2 out of 3 wasn't bad. Her daily meditation wasn't spiritual, it was combat preparation. Every morning at 5 a.m., Harper ran through fight sequences in her mind, muscle memory keeping her sharp even without a gym. The other students saw a quiet girl who studied during lunch. What they didn't see was someone who could end a fight before most people realized it had started. Chase Blackwood was American prep school royalty trust fund confidence wrapped in a 6-foot 3-inch frame. Destined for Yale like his father and grandfather before him. At 18, he ruled Riverside Prep through a carefully cultivated combination of charisma, cruelty, and family connections. His father owned half the city's commercial real estate. His mother chaired the school board. But what made Chase truly dangerous wasn't his money, it was his intelligence. He understood exactly how far he could push before consequences arrived. And he'd turned psychological warfare into an art form. Chase's favorite targets were scholarship students, not because he hated poor people, but because breaking someone who'd fought so hard to be there gave him a rush that daddy's money couldn't buy. Chase collected trophies from his victims. In his locker, hidden behind lacrosse photos, were small items he'd taken during his humiliation campaigns: a pen, a hair tie, a button. Today, he was planning to add something bigger to his collection. His crew called him the Collector. They had no idea he was about to meet someone who collected something entirely different: broken bullies. Riverside Prep operated on an unspoken caste system more rigid than anything in ancient Rome. At the top, legacy families whose names graced buildings. Second tier, new money, trying to buy their way in. Bottom scholarship students who existed solely to make the school look diverse in promotional materials. The rules were simple: know your place, play your role, and never challenge the natural order. 3 students had tried to report Chase's behavior in the past 2 years. One transferred schools for family reasons. Another lost their scholarship for academic irregularities. The third simply disappeared from Riverside Prep one day, with rumors of a disciplinary issue. Today was different. For one reason, Harper Sinclair didn't know these rules. And even if she had, 8 years of fighting for survival had taught her that some battles were worth the consequences. Miss Elena Rivers, the newest faculty member, watched these dynamics with growing concern. As the only teacher who'd grown up working class herself, she recognized the signs of institutional bullying disguised as tradition. Today, she would witness something that would force her to choose between keeping her job and keeping her conscience. Every school has these invisible power structures. Every institution has its Chase Blackwoods and Harper Sinclairs. As we dive deeper into this story, think about the ones you've witnessed, because by the end, you might see them very differently. The attack began where they always did at Riverside Prep, in the spaces between official oversight. Harper was alone in the advanced physics lab during lunch, working on extra credit that might boost her GPA high enough for early Stanford admission. The scholarship only covered tuition, everything else depended on merit. Chase entered with his lieutenant, Meredith Kane, blonde, beautiful, and cruel with the precision of a surgical blade. Behind them walked Tyler Brooks, a follower whose conscience hadn't quite died yet. The dynamic was immediately clear to anyone who understood pack behavior: alpha, enforcer, and reluctant witness. "Well, well," Chase drawled, his voice carrying that particular prep school accent that screamed entitlement. "The scholarship girl, working lunch again. Don't they feed you people at the state home?" Harper didn't look up from her calculations. She'd learned that engagement only encouraged predators. Her pencil continued moving across the paper with steady precision, even as her peripheral vision tracked their positions. 3 against 1, clear exit routes blocked. Teacher supervision absent. "I'm talking to you. Charity case." Meredith pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is going to be so good for the group chat. Weird scholarship girl ignores basic social cues." The casual cruelty in her voice made Tyler shift uncomfortably, but not enough to speak up. Harper finally looked up, her green eyes meeting Chase's blue ones for the first time. The silence stretched between them like a live wire, crackling with potential energy. "Is there something you need? Or are you just practicing being important?" The lab went silent. No scholarship student had ever talked back to Chase Blackwood. The institutional hierarchy simply didn't allow for that kind of rebellion. Tyler actually took a step backward, recognizing the moment when casual harassment became something more dangerous. Chase's smile widened, but something predatory flickered behind it. "Practicing, I don't need practice. Harper, I'm naturally gifted at getting what I want." He moved closer to her workstation, his presence designed to intimidate through proximity and size advantage. "And what I want right now is to see if you're as tough as you pretend to be." Harper's hand stilled on her pencil. 8 years of training had taught her to recognize the moment when words became threats. Her body language remained relaxed, but her weight shifted almost imperceptibly to the balls of her feet. "Back up! Chase! Make me!" As Chase leaned over her desk, Harper's hand reflexively shifted into a defensive position so subtle that only someone with training would notice. But Tyler Brooks had wrestled since middle school. He saw it. And something about Harper's stance made him deeply uncomfortable. There was a stillness to her movement that reminded him of coiled springs under tension. The bell rang, saving them all from whatever was about to happen next. But the damage was already done. Lines had been drawn, territory marked, and Chase Blackwood had just discovered that his newest target might not be as easy as the others. As they left, Chase whispered, "This isn't finished. Charity case. Not even close." Tyler lingered behind, something gnawing at his conscience. "Hey, Harper, be careful around him. He's different when he really wants something." Harper nodded, but she was already calculating angles and exit routes. She'd been careful her whole life. Today, careful might not be enough. The cafeteria at Riverside Prep was a social ecosystem as complex as any jungle. Chase's table sat in the center like apex predators surveying their domain. Harper usually ate in the library. But today, Miss Rivers had specifically asked her to join the community lunch experience. What Harper didn't know was that Miss Rivers was documenting social dynamics for a paper on institutional classism. What she was about to witness would become evidence. Harper selected her usual water and whatever was cheapest, as she looked for an empty table. Chase's voice boomed across the room like a royal summons. "Harper Scholarship Girl, come sit with us." Every conversation stopped. 200 students turned to watch like spectators at a gladiator match. This wasn't an invitation, it was a command performance designed to establish dominance in front of the maximum audience. Harper felt every eye in the room measuring her response. Walking away would label her as antisocial. Sitting down would make her pray. She walked over with the steady gait of someone who'd learned never to show fear, even when terrified. "See, I told you she was social," Chase announced to his table with theatrical warmth. "Harper, tell everyone about your family. What do your parents do?" The question was designed to expose her vulnerability in front of the crowd, force her to either lie or admit to her orphan status for their entertainment. Harper met his gaze directly, her voice carrying to nearby tables with crystal clarity. "They're dead. Car accident when I was 9. Anything else you'd like to know about my trauma for lunch entertainment?" The table went quiet. Even Meredith looked uncomfortable with the raw honesty, but Chase's smile only widened, feeding off the discomfort he'd created. "I'm so sorry for your loss. That must be why you're so intense. Orphan anger issues, right?" Harper stood up slowly, her movement controlled and deliberate. "Are you done?" "Actually, no." Chase stood too, using his height advantage like a weapon. "I think there's something fake about you. Harper, like you're pretending to be something you're not." As he spoke, Chase moved around her in a circle of predator's assessment designed to intimidate and establish territorial dominance. What he didn't realize was that Harper was also circling, maintaining optimal distance and angle with the unconscious precision of trained muscle memory. To untrained eyes, they looked like they were just talking. To anyone who understood combat, they were already fighting. "What am I pretending to be? Chase? Weak, harmless, just another grateful charity case." His voice carried to every corner of the cafeteria, ensuring maximum audience for the humiliation. "But I think you're hiding something, and I always find what people are hiding." Harper's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Some secrets are hidden for good reasons. Not from me, they're not." Miss Rivers stood up from her table, recognizing the moment when verbal sparring became something more dangerous. But before she could intervene, Harper spoke again with quiet intensity that somehow carried more weight than shouting. "Chase, you have 5 seconds to walk away from this conversation. I'm giving you this one chance to be smart." The entire cafeteria held its breath. The background noise of clinking utensils and whispered conversations disappeared entirely. Everyone sensed they were witnessing something significant, though few understood exactly what. Chase laughed, the sound harsh and dismissive. Or what? Charity case. You'll cry, call your social worker. Harper smiled then, and Tyler Brooks felt his stomach drop. He'd seen that smile before, in wrestling matches right before someone got hurt badly. There was something arctic about it, something that suggested violence was not only possible, but carefully calculated. Or you'll find out why some orphans survive when others don't. The bell rang again, shattering the moment like glass, but everyone in that cafeteria knew they'd just witnessed the calm before something explosive. The institutional order that had governed Riverside Prep for generations was about to face its first real challenge. The ambush came during the period transition when the hallways were crowded enough for witnesses, but chaotic enough to avoid teacher supervision. A calculated strike designed for maximum impact and minimal oversight. Harper was heading to her AP Literature class when she noticed the subtle formation Chase approaching from the front, Meredith flanking from the right, 2 football players blocking the stairwell behind her. This wasn't spontaneous harassment. This was a coordinated operation planned with military precision. Harper recognized the tactical setup immediately. She'd seen similar formations in foster homes when older kids decided to teach someone a lesson. The only difference was the expensive uniforms and manicured lawns. "Harper," Chase called out, his voice carrying false friendliness that fooled no one. "We need to finish our conversation from lunch." Students began forming a circle with the instinctive hunger of teenagers sensing drama. Phones appearing like magic as the potential for viral content drew them closer. Whatever was about to happen would be immortalized on social media within minutes, shared across platforms before administration could respond. Harper stopped walking and assessed her options with clinical precision. The girls' bathroom was 20 feet away. Miss Rivers's classroom was down the hall. The main office around the corner. All too far to reach before the confrontation escalated beyond verbal sparring. "What conversation?" "Chase, I thought we were done." "Oh, we're just getting started." Chase moved closer, and Harper could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something else, adrenaline. He was enjoying this build-up, savoring the anticipation of public humiliation like fine wine. "See, I've been thinking about what you said, about secrets, and I realized you're right, everyone has them." His smile was shark-like, predatory, and calculating. "So I did some research on you." Harper Sinclair. Harper's blood went cold, but her expression remained neutral. 8 years of survival had taught her never to show weakness when predators were circling, even when every instinct screamed danger. Turns out foster kids leave quite a paper trail, especially ones who get into altercations at their previous schools. Chase pulled out his phone, showing a screen that Harper couldn't see, but that made her face go pale. Amazing what you can find with the right connections. Police reports, incident files, disciplinary records. The circle of students tightened, sensing blood in the water like sharks responding to chum. Some held phones ready to record. Others whispered speculation about what secrets were about to be revealed. Tyler Brooks stood at the edge of the crowd, his wrestling instincts telling him this was about to become something he didn't want to witness. "So here's what's going to happen," Chase continued with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "You're going to admit to everyone here that you're not the innocent little scholarship girl you pretend to be. You're going to tell them what you really are." Harper's hands clenched into fists before she could stop herself, a tell that Chase noticed with satisfaction. "And if I don't," Chase's smile became predatory, revealing the true nature beneath his cultured exterior. "Then I tell them for you, and then I send copies of these files to Stanford admissions. and the scholarship committee, and anyone else who might be interested in knowing what kind of person they're really supporting. The hallway was dead silent, except for the soft sound of phones recording. 50 teenagers holding their breath as they watched a scholarship student's future hang in the balance. Some felt guilty for watching. Most felt thrilled by the drama unfolding before them. Harper looked around at the circle of faces, some hungry for entertainment, some uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene, some genuinely concerned but too scared to act. She thought about Stanford, about her future, about the promise she'd made to stay invisible and graduate without incident. Then she thought about every foster home where she'd been told to stay quiet. Every time staying quiet had only made things worse. Harper Sinclair had spent 8 years learning to fight. But today, she was about to learn something even more powerful: how to stop running from who she really was. "Chase," she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its low volume. "You have no idea what you just started." What happened next would change everything, not just for Harper and Chase, but for every student who'd ever felt powerless against institutional cruelty. The first punch was about to be thrown, and it wouldn't be Harper who threw it. Chase Blackwood had orchestrated public humiliations before, but this one was his masterpiece. The hallway circle had grown to nearly 50 students, with more streaming in as word spread through social media like wildfire. The institutional power structure of Riverside Prep was about to witness its most public challenge ever. "Last chance, Harper," Chase announced, his voice carrying to every corner with the authority of inherited privilege. "Admit what you really are, or I'll do it for you." Harper stood in the center of the circle, calculating odds the way she'd been taught: 50 witnesses, multiple cameras, administration nowhere in sight. The mathematics of violence had always been simple: assess threats, identify exits, choose optimal timing. "I know what I am, Chase. The question is, do you know what you are?" Chase's smile flickered for the first time. This wasn't going according to his carefully planned script. His victims were supposed to break down, beg for mercy, or flee in humiliation. They weren't supposed to ask him uncomfortable questions. "I'm someone who gets what he wants," he said, stepping closer with the confidence of someone who'd never been seriously challenged. "And what I want is for everyone to see the real Harper Sinclair." Chase reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder like a prosecutor presenting evidence, the gesture theatrical and designed for maximum impact. "Police report from Lincoln High School. Denver, Harper Sinclair, age 15, arrested for assault. Charges dropped when the victim refused to press charges." Gasps echoed around the circle. Phones zoomed in for close-ups as students realized they were witnessing something bigger than typical high school drama. This was character assassination conducted with institutional precision. "Tell them about Marcus. Harper, tell them how you put a 17-year-old boy in the hospital." Harper's face went white, but her voice remained steady. Marcus was what asking you out, making you uncomfortable. So you decided to put him in a coma." Chase's voice carried accusation and moral superiority, painting Harper as the aggressor in a situation none of them understood. The crowd murmured. The narrative was shifting against Harper before she could explain the truth. Social media algorithms loved simple stories: violent scholarship girl attacks innocent boy, made for perfect viral content. "That's not what happened," Harper said, but her voice was barely audible above the growing whispers of judgment. "Then tell us what did happen," Chase commanded with the authority of inherited power. Tell them why a foster kid with anger issues deserves to be here instead of kids whose families built this school." Tyler Brooks stepped forward from the crowd, his wrestling instincts finally overriding his fear of social consequences. "Chase! Man, maybe this is enough." "Shut up, Tyler!" Chase snapped with vicious intensity. "This is about justice, about protecting our school from people who don't belong here." That's when he made his fatal mistake, the single decision that would transform him from predator to victim in 12 seconds flat. Chase reached out and grabbed Harper's blazer, intending to tear it open and expose whatever was underneath, hoping for something embarrassing. Something that would complete her humiliation in front of the maximum audience. Instead, he ripped away the only thing keeping Harper's real identity hidden. Underneath her conservative blazer was a tank top that revealed arms marked with scars from 8 years of serious training and a small tattoo on her shoulder that made Tyler Brooks whisper, "Holy shit!" The Muay Thai gym's symbol, the same one he'd seen on professional fighters during tournaments. Chase had just challenged someone way above his weight class, and he was about to learn the difference between institutional power and actual capability. Time slowed the way it always did before Harper entered combat mode, the world becoming crystalline and precise as adrenaline sharpened every sense. Chase was still holding her torn blazer, his face cycling through confusion as he processed what he was seeing: professional fighter scars, muscle definition that didn't come from casual gym visits, the kind of conditioning that could only be earned through years of getting hit by people who hit hard. "Chase," Harper said, her voice completely calm now, despite the chaos around them. "Let go of my uniform." "What the hell?" Chase started, but he was already moving wrong, overcommitted and off balance like every untrained fighter who'd ever stepped into a ring expecting intimidation to substitute for skill. Harper shifted her weight subtly, making Chase think she was backing down. He tightened his grip on her blazer, pulling her closer to continue his domination display. Exactly what she wanted him to do. Exactly what 8 years of training had taught her to create. "You want to know about Marcus?" Harper asked conversationally, even as she positioned her feet with unconscious precision. "Marcus was my foster brother, and he was raping my foster sister every night while the parents were at work." The crowd went silent. The casual cruelty they'd expected to witness suddenly transformed into something much darker and more complex. Harper's left hand moved to trap Chase's grabbing arm with the fluid efficiency of practiced technique. "I didn't put Marcus in a coma because he asked me out. Chase, I put him in a coma because he was a predator." Her right knee came up like a piston, 8 years of Muay Thai training behind it. Chase saw it coming for exactly half a second, long enough to realize he'd made a catastrophic error in judgment, but not long enough to do anything about it. "And when I see a predator," Harper continued with Arctic calm, "I eliminate the threat." The flying knee caught Chase directly under the chin, with the sound of a baseball bat hitting a watermelon. His head snapped back. His grip on Harper's blazer released, and his 185-pound frame left the ground entirely. Years of privilege and inherited power meant nothing against the basic physics of properly applied force. Chase Blackwood, heir to a real estate empire and 3-generation Yale legacy, crashed into the row of lockers behind him with enough force to dent metal. He slid down the wall and crumpled to the floor, unconscious before he hit the ground. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth like crimson punctuation marking the end of his reign. Harper stood exactly where she'd been before, breathing normally, her torn blazer in her hand. The only sign of what had happened was the unconscious body of Riverside Prep's most powerful student lying motionless at her feet. The only sound was the soft click of phones recording. 50 students had just witnessed the most one-sided fight in Riverside Prep history. The untouchable golden boy had been knocked unconscious by the quiet scholarship girl in less time than it took to microwave popcorn. But Harper wasn't done. She walked over to Chase's unconscious form and knelt down, checking his pulse with professional efficiency that spoke of training beyond fighting. Satisfied that he was alive, she stood and addressed the crowd with the calm authority of someone who'd just proven their point definitively. "Marcus was my foster brother," she repeated, her voice carrying to every phone camera in the circle. "He was sexually assaulting my 8-year-old foster sister Lily every night for 6 months. The parents didn't believe her because Marcus was their biological son, and Lily was just another foster placement." The hallway was dead silent. Even the background noise of school life seemed to pause as students processed the truth behind the violence they'd just witnessed. "So yes, I put him in the hospital, and I'd do it again." Harper's green eyes swept the crowd with unflinching directness. "Because some people mistake kindness for weakness. They mistake silence for permission. They mistake survival for submission." She looked down at Chase's motionless form with something that might have been pity. "And sometimes, the only way to stop a predator is to show them what real strength looks like." Harper picked up her backpack and started walking toward Miss Rivers's classroom with the same steady pace she'd maintained throughout the confrontation, as if knocking out the school's most powerful student was just another Tuesday afternoon activity. "Someone should probably call the nurse," she said over her shoulder without breaking stride. "And maybe the police. I'll be in AP Literature if anyone needs me." The crowd parted like water. Riverside Prep had just witnessed the end of one era and the beginning of something completely different. In 12 seconds, Harper Sinclair had shattered every assumption about power, privilege, and what happened when someone finally refused to stay quiet. The viral video that would change American education forever was already uploading to social media platforms within hours. Harper Sinclair's flying knee would be seen by millions, sparking conversations about institutional bullying, survivor advocacy, and the hidden cost of staying silent. But in the immediate aftermath, as Chase Blackwood lay unconscious and Harper calmly attended literature class, no one could have predicted how far the ripples of those 12 seconds would spread. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Tyler Brooks was the first to move, kneeling beside Chase's unconscious form while pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "This is Tyler Brooks at Riverside Prep. We need an ambulance in the East Hallway. Student is unconscious. Possible head trauma." Meredith Kane stood frozen, her phone still recording, trying to process how the narrative had flipped so completely. 1 minute, Chase was exposing Harper as a violent imposter. The next minute, he was bleeding on the floor, while Harper calmly discussed sexual assault survival with the detached precision of a trauma counselor. The crowd began to fracture. Some students rushed toward the scene, hungry for more drama. Others backed away, recognizing they'd witnessed something that would have serious consequences for everyone involved. Miss Rivers appeared at the edge of the crowd, and when she saw Chase on the ground with Harper walking away, her face showed something unexpected satisfaction. "Everyone back up," she commanded with authority that surprised students who'd only seen her gentle teacher persona. "Give him space to breathe, and put those phones away before I confiscate every device in this hallway." Students reluctantly lowered their cameras, but everyone knew the damage was already done, within minutes. The footage would be uploaded to every social media platform in existence. As paramedics loaded Chase onto a stretcher, his eyes focused enough to see the dented lockers where his body had hit. Then he saw the crowd of students watching him with expressions ranging from concern to calculation. For the first time in his life, Chase Blackwood was the victim instead of the predator, and he had no idea how to handle that role reversal. Principal Cross's office had been transformed into an interrogation room. Harper sat calmly in the center chair, her torn blazer replaced with a spare from the lost and found. Across from her sat Principal Cross, Detective Maria Santos from the city police, and, unexpectedly, a woman in an expensive suit who'd introduced herself as Chase's family attorney. "Miss Sinclair," Detective Santos began, her voice professionally neutral. "We need to discuss what happened in the hallway today." Harper nodded with the same calm she'd maintained throughout the confrontation. "Chase Blackwood grabbed my uniform and tore it. I defended myself. He fell and hit his head. Is he okay?" The attorney leaned forward like a shark, sensing blood. "Miss Sinclair, you used what appears to be professional-level combat training against an unarmed student. In many jurisdictions, that constitutes assault with a deadly weapon." Harper smiled slightly, the expression carrying no warmth but infinite confidence. "I used exactly the minimum force necessary to stop an assault in progress. And if my training makes me a deadly weapon, then every student in this room should be grateful that weapon was pointed at a predator instead of them." Detective Santos consulted her notes with growing interest. "Multiple witnesses heard you mention someone named Marcus. Can you elaborate on that situation?" Harper's expression hardened like steel cooling in winter air. "Marcus Williams was my foster brother in Denver. For 6 months, he sexually assaulted our 8-year-old foster sister while the parents were at work. When Lily finally told me what was happening, I reported it to our foster parents, to child services, and to the police." She paused, letting the weight of institutional failure settle in the room. "Nothing happened. Marcus was their biological son. Lily was just another foster placement. The adults decided she was making it up for attention." The attorney tried a different approach, sensing her original strategy crumbling. "Miss Sinclair, my client is an honor student with no history of violence. Are you claiming he was attempting to sexually assault you?" "Your client was attempting to humiliate me sexually by tearing off my clothing in front of 50 witnesses," Harper replied with devastating calm. "In legal terms, that's sexual assault. In practical terms, it was predatory behavior that needed to be stopped." Harper pulled out her phone and played a recording that filled the room with Chase's own words. "Tell them why a foster kid with anger issues deserves to be here instead of kids whose families built this school." And the room went silent as Chase's voice continued. "This is about justice, about protecting our school from people who don't belong here. Your honor student client has been systematically harassing scholarship students for years," Harper continued with prosecutorial precision. "Today, he escalated to physical assault and attempted public humiliation. I stopped him. End of story." While Harper sat in Principal Cross's office, the internet was exploding. Tyler Brooks had uploaded his phone footage within minutes, but it was Meredith Kane's recording that went truly viral. Her video captured not just the fight, but Harper's full explanation about Marcus and her foster sister. Within 2 hours. Justice. For Harper was trending nationally. The response was immediate and polarizing. But it was the response from an unexpected source that changed everything. "Harper Sinclair saved my life when I was 8 years old," posted Lily Williams, now 15 and a survivor advocate with 2.3 million followers. "The adults failed me. The system failed me. But my foster sister didn't fail me. Marcus Williams was my rapist. Harper Sinclair was my hero. Hatch justice for Harper. Lily Williams was no longer a traumatized 8-year-old. She was a confident teenager whose confirmation of Harper's story reached 10 million people in the first hour. Even Marcus Williams, now in college and therapy, publicly confirmed Harper's version. I was young and stupid, and I hurt people who didn't deserve it. Harper stopped me when the adults wouldn't. She saved Lily. She probably saved me too from becoming something worse. The narrative flipped overnight. Major news outlets picked up the story as "Foster Sister Confirms Viral Fighter's Heroic Past," ran on every major network. Chase's social media meltdown involving racial slurs and entitled rants provided even more evidence of his character before his accounts were suspended. By evening, Riverside Prep was under siege. News vans lined the street. Protesters gathered with signs reading, "Protect Foster Kids," and former students began coming forward with their own stories of harassment and discrimination. What had started as a simple school fight was becoming a federal investigation into institutional bias and systemic bullying in elite education. The changes at Riverside Prep became a case study in institutional transformation. Principal Cross stepped down to pursue other opportunities, replaced by Dr. Amelia Foster, whose first assembly announced, "This institution has failed many students by prioritizing donor relationships over student safety. That ends today." The Harper Sinclair protocols became the school's new framework anonymous reporting systems. Zero tolerance for harassment, regardless of family status. Mandatory bias training, and restorative justice practices. Tyler Brooks became the school's most effective peer counselor. Even Meredith Kane channeled her influence into mentorship programs. By Harper's senior year, Riverside Prep was unrecognizable. The girl who'd tried to stay invisible had become the most visible student. But instead of negative attention, she found herself surrounded by supporters and fellow advocates. Her lunch table hosted daily discussions about social justice and positive change. As valedictorian, Harper's graduation speech became the most watched high school address in social media history. 3 years ago, I walked into this school trying to be invisible, she told the assembled crowd. I thought survival meant staying quiet, staying grateful, staying small. She paused, looking at Lily in the audience, now a confident teenager and student advocate. I learned that survival isn't about staying quiet. It's about finding your voice. It's not about staying grateful for scraps. It's about demanding the feast you've earned. And it's not about staying small. It's about growing into the person the world needs you to be. 5 years later, Stanford Law School's moot court championship watched Harper Sinclair deliver closing arguments with the same calm authority that had once told Chase Blackwood to back away. The techniques that had kept her alive in foster care now made her one of California's most formidable advocates, representing students facing institutional harassment through her foundation. Harper's phone buzzed with messages. Tyler Brooks, now a counselor helping kids find conflict resolution. Lily Williams, a journalist exposing foster care reform. Even Chase Blackwood, working with nonprofits for juvenile offenders, writing simply, "Thank you for stopping me before I became worse." The orphan girl who'd once tried to make herself invisible had become a symbol of hope for anyone who'd ever felt powerless, proving that courage was contagious, justice was possible. And sometimes the best way to heal from trauma was ensuring it never happened to anyone else. Walking through Stanford's campus, Harper passed students wearing Harper Sinclair Foundation Fighting for the Forgotten t-shirts. She realized she was no longer fighting alone. Her story had created an army of advocates, each carrying forward the message that victims didn't have to stay victims. Harper Sinclair's flying knee had lasted 12 seconds. Her impact would last forever. The comments fill up every day with stories from people who've found courage to speak up, fight back, refuse to accept that being different makes them less deserving of respect and safety. Real strength isn't about knowing how to hurt people. It's about knowing how to stop the hurt from spreading. Harper Sinclair knew both, and that's what made her legendary. 3 months after Harper's moot court victory, she received a call that would change everything again. A federal investigation into elite school networks had uncovered evidence of systematic abuse spanning decades, involving some of the most powerful families in America. They needed someone who understood both the legal system and institutional power. They needed Harper Sinclair. But this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. She had an army. The Harper Sinclair Foundation had grown beyond expectations. What started as one girl's refusal to stay silent had become a nationwide network of advocates and survivors working to dismantle systems that protected predators while silencing victims. Every week brought new cases, new proof that Harper's 12 seconds of courage had created something unstoppable. Standing in her Stanford office, surrounded by case files and thank you letters from students across America, Harper reflected on the journey from that physics lab where it all began. The girl who'd calculated survival now calculated justice and transformation. Her phone buzzed with a text from a Texas student. Saw your video, found my courage, reported my harassment today. They're actually listening. Thank you for showing me I don't have to stay quiet. Every person has that moment when they decide between accepting injustice and fighting for change, between staying invisible and stepping into the light. Remember that silence protects predators, not victims. That institutions change when individuals refuse to accept the unacceptable. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Your courage matters. And somewhere out there, someone invisible and powerless is waiting to see they're not alone.